Hey everyone, today I want to share an unbelievable story. How English changed my life, led me to my dreams, and brought me success. Do you have big dreams? Do you want to be a doctor, engineer, lawyer, or businessman? Then listen carefully. English is everything. It's spoken by 1.5 billion people worldwide. It's the language of travel, business, and the internet. Without it, you could miss life-changing opportunities, better jobs, international friends, and even enjoying movies and books in their original form. But don't worry. You can start learning today and become part of this global community. If I can do it, you can too. My name is Liana, and I'm from Mexico. I grew up in a small town called Puebla. My family? Not rich, not poor. Just in the middle. We had enough to live, but luxuries? Forget it. My father was a taxi driver, and my mother was a school teacher. They always told me, education is the key to success. Since I was a little girl, I had only one dream, to become a doctor. I still remember the moment that changed my life forever. I was 10 years old. My little brother was very sick, burning with fever. My parents were crying, terrified. Then a doctor walked in, calm, confident, and full of kindness. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of him." I watched in awe as he checked my brother, gave him medicine, and spoke with so much knowledge. A few hours later, my brother's fever was gone. He was safe. At that moment, I knew I had to become a doctor. I wanted to save lives just like him. But as I grew up, I realized something terrible. If you want to be a doctor, you need English. All medical books, English. Medical research, English. Even in Mexico, doctors had to know English to study, work, and communicate. And me? My English was terrible. I went to a public school where they taught almost no English. I knew a few words. Hello, how are you? But when I saw a full English sentence, my brain froze. I remember my teacher once asked, "Liana, can you read this sentence?" I looked at the book. The words were dancing. My throat went dry. I couldn't read. I couldn't understand. "I don't know, miss," I whispered. The class burst into laughter. That night, I sat alone in my room, defeated. How will I become a doctor if I can't even read a simple sentence? I felt hopeless. Then, everything changed. One evening, my father came home from work, exhausted. He sat next to me and asked, "Liana, what's wrong? You've been so sad lately." I hesitated, but finally admitted, "Papa, I want to be a doctor, but my English is so bad. Without English, I can't study medicine." He was silent for a long time. Then he said something that shocked me. "If English is stopping you, then go to a place where everyone speaks English." I blinked. "But Papa, we don't have money for that." He smiled and said, "We don't have much, but we have enough. Your dreams are important." That night, my parents and I made a life-changing decision. We chose Australia. Why? When everyone speaks English, I'd have no choice but to learn. Great education system. Australia has amazing schools. Free. Friendly and diverse people. A perfect place for international students. Affordable. Compared to the US or the UK, Australia was possible. It wasn't easy. My parents used almost all their savings for my flight, my English school, and my first few months in Sydney. Before I left, my mother held my hand and said, "Liana, we are giving you everything we have. Promise me you won't give up." Tears filled my eyes. I hugged her tightly. "I promise, Mama." And with just one suitcase, a little money, and a huge dream, I flew to Australia. The moment I landed in Sydney, boom, it hit me. I was in a whole new world. The weather? Cold. In Mexico, it was always warm, but here, my fingers felt like ice. The food? Strange. I missed my mother's homemade tacos and tamales. The people? Nice, but they spoke so fast. And then, the biggest problem? English. At the airport, a man asked, "Hey, do you need a taxi?" I panicked. I had no idea what he said. I just smiled awkwardly and said, "Yes." Then he asked, "Where to?" My brain shut down. I didn't understand. My heart pounded. What do I do? Finally, I just showed him the address on my phone. That night, sitting in my tiny rented room, I cried. What am I doing here? I can't understand anything. How will I survive? For the first time in my life, I felt completely lost. The next day, I went to my English language school. My heart was pounding. The teacher smiled warmly and said, "Welcome, everyone. Let's introduce ourselves." My turn came. My hands were shaking. My mouth was dry. I stood up and whispered, "My name, Liana. From Mexico." I wanted to say more. I wanted to sound confident. But my mind was blank. The words were stuck in my throat. The teacher smiled, encouraging me. But then I heard it. Laughter. Some students giggled. Maybe they didn't mean to be rude. Maybe they were just surprised at my broken English. But in that moment, I felt humiliated. That night, I made a decision. No matter how hard it is, no matter how many mistakes I make, I will learn English. I promised myself I would do everything possible to become fluent. And that was the beginning of my English learning journey. The first few weeks in Australia, a roller coaster. Exciting, terrifying, a whole new world. Back home, I understood everything. But here, I felt like a baby learning to speak again. Before I tell you how I improved my English, let me share the strangest things I noticed in Australia. Yes, no school uniforms. In Mexico, students always wore uniforms. But here, kids wore anything, jeans, hoodies, even pajamas, and nobody cared. 2. Personal space. In Mexico, we hug, kiss on the cheek, and stand close when talking. But in Australia, people liked space. If you hug someone without asking, they feel uncomfortable. S. Crazy weather. 1 minute, hot and sunny. The next, rainy and freezing. I never knew how to dress. Self-checkout. In supermarkets, there were no cashiers. People scanned and paid for their own groceries. Saying, "Sorry for everything." Even if you step on their foot, they say, "Sorry." It was so funny. 6. Huge food portions. I ordered a small meal once, and it was big enough for 3 people. But the biggest shock? English. People spoke so fast. And the slang? Impossible. In school, I learned proper English. But in real life, people said, "Want to grab a coffee? Do you want to get a coffee? I'm down for that." I agree. That's so lit. That's amazing. I felt like I had never studied English before. The second day of class. A disaster. The teacher gave us a simple writing task. I was excited. I can do this. But when she returned my paper, it was covered in red marks. She said, "Liana, your writing is good, but your sentence structure needs work. You think in Spanish and translate into English. That's why it sounds strange." I felt frustrated. Speaking was even worse. The teacher asked me a question. I knew the answer in my head. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. I wanted to cry. Will I ever speak English fluently? But I refused to stay weak in English. I knew that if I didn't improve, my dream of becoming a doctor would die. So, I made a plan. My crazy plan to learn English, the headphone trick, talking to myself in public. My biggest problem? Speaking. I was too shy, too scared of making mistakes. So, I found a solution. I put on headphones and walked around the city, pretending to be on a phone call. But actually, I was talking to myself in English. I'm walking on the street. The sky is blue. That woman is wearing a red coat. Now I'm entering a cafe. I will order a coffee. It felt weird at first, but it helped me think in English and practice without fear. B, the 3 new words rule. Every day I learned 3 new words, and I forced myself to use them in a sentence. C, no more subtitles. At first, I watched movies in English with subtitles, but then I realized I was reading, not listening. So I turned off the subtitles. At first, it was so hard, but slowly, I started catching words. I started understanding. The moment everything changed. One day I walked into a cafe. I told myself, today I will speak in English, no matter what. I walked to the counter. The barista smiled and said, "Hey, what can I get you today?" My heart was racing. "Don't panic, Liana. You can do this." I took a deep breath. "I would like a cappuccino, please." She smiled. "Do you want it with almond milk or regular milk?" I understood her. Quickly, I said, "Regular milk, please." She handed me my coffee. "Here you go. Have a great day." And I replied, "You too." It was a small conversation, but I felt like I had won a gold medal. That day I realized something important. English is not about being perfect. It's about being confident. Surviving in Australia. The hard truth. Learning English was one challenge, but surviving in Australia, another battle. Australia is expensive. Here's what I spent each month. Rent for a small room, $800. I had a roommate to save money. Groceries, $250. I learned to cook at home. Transportation, $120. A bus pass in Sydney. Phone bill, $50. English classes, $500. To survive, I worked part-time in a small cafe. My daily routine: wake up at 6 a.m., go to school, work at the cafe, come home exhausted, study English, sleep, repeat. I miss my family. I missed home. But every time I felt like giving up, I remembered my parents' sacrifice. I could not fail. The biggest turning point. At first, my brain always translated. I hear English. I translate to Spanish. I think of an answer in Spanish. I translate back to English. Then I speak. This took forever. But after 4 months of daily English exposure, something amazing happened. One day I was at a grocery store. The cashier asked, "Do you need a bag?" And without thinking, I said, "No, I have one. Thanks." For the first time ever, my brain didn't translate. I realized I was finally thinking in English. If you're struggling with English, here's my advice. Speak every day, even if you're alone. Use the headphone trick like I did. Stop translating in your head. Start thinking in English. 3. Talk to native speakers, even if it's scary, even if you feel stupid. Just do it. 4. Surround yourself with English. Change your phone, movies, music, everything to English. 5. Don't be afraid of mistakes. Mistakes help you grow. And most importantly, never give up. I still remember the day everything changed for me, the day I realized, wow, I can actually speak English. Facing my biggest fear. Talking to native speakers. By the time I had been in Canada for 6 months, my English had improved. I could understand people better. I could order food without feeling scared. I could even talk to my classmates. But I still had one big problem. I was terrified of talking to native speakers. Why? Because they spoke too fast. Because they used too much slang. Because I always felt stupid when I didn't understand something. So I avoided conversations. If someone asked me something, I would just say, "Yes, ha ha ha, yeah," even if I had no idea what they said. But I knew, if I wanted to be fluent, I had to face this fear. So I made a crazy decision. The coffee shop moment that changed everything. One morning, I walked into my favorite coffee shop. I told myself, today, you are going to have a real conversation with a native speaker, no running away. I stood in line, my hands sweating. Then a girl next to me smiled and said, "Ugh, this line is so long, right?" I froze. This was it, my moment. I took a deep breath and said, "Yeah, it's really long." She smiled. "I come here every morning. It's always like this." My brain started panicking. What do I say? But instead of overthinking, I just said, "Oh, really? I just moved here, so I don't know." She smiled and said, "Oh, cool. Where are you from?" And just like that, we had a conversation. For the first time, I wasn't translating in my head. For the first time, I wasn't scared. For the first time, I just talked. After that day, something clicked in my brain. I realized I can do this. And that moment gave me confidence. And confidence was the missing key. Taking my English to the next level, sounding like a native speaker. Now that I was confident, I didn't want to just speak English. I wanted to sound like a native speaker. So, I started doing something crazy. The shadowing method. I started copying everything I heard. Whenever I watched a TV show, I paused, repeated the sentence exactly like the actor, and tried to match their accent. For example, I heard, "Oh my God, that's insane." I paused and copied, Oh my God, that's insane! I copied the tone, speed, and emotion. I did this for hours every day. At first, it felt weird, but after 1 month, my pronunciation improved so much. Fixing my mistakes. Forever. I also started keeping a notebook of my English mistakes. Every time I made a mistake, I wrote it down and corrected it. Example: I agree with you. I agree with you. By reviewing my mistakes every day, I stopped repeating them. Making Canadian friends, the hardest but fastest way to improve. This was the hardest step for me, but I forced myself to make Canadian friends because I knew it was the fastest way to improve. Here's what I did. 1. I joined local events. I went to free meetups for international students. I used conversation exchange apps. I found Canadians who wanted to learn my language, so we did a language exchange. 3. I talked to my coworkers. I stopped being shy and started chatting with them more. And guess what? The more I talked to real Canadians, the more natural my English became. The hardest part: surviving in Canada. Even though my English was improving, life was still hard. I was always tired. Studying English, working part-time, cooking my own food, it was exhausting. I missed my family. I couldn't visit home. Flights were too expensive. I struggled with money. Even after 6 months, I still felt broke all the time. One day, I had only $5 left in my bank account. I sat in my tiny room and cried. Why is this so hard? Am I making a mistake? Should I just go back home? But then, I remembered why I was here. I didn't come all this way just to give up. So I wiped my tears and said, "No, I will make this work." And I did. From a broke student to a future doctor, I want you to imagine something. Imagine waking up every morning in a beautiful apartment, looking at the city skyline, drinking coffee and thinking, I made it. I did it. I became the person I always dreamed of. That's my life now. But 5 years ago, I was a broke student, struggling with English, feeling lost in a foreign country. To get into medical school, I had to pass the IELTS exam. And let me tell you, it was terrifying. But you know what? Money wasn't the best part. The best part was saving lives. One day, a little girl came into the hospital. She was sick, scared, and crying. I held her hand and said, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll take care of you." Her mother looked at me, tears in her eyes, and said, "Thank you, doctor." At that moment, I felt something I had never felt before. I wasn't just an English learner anymore. I wasn't just a student. I was a doctor. And I had earned this. A message. You need to hear. Now, listen to me carefully. A lot of people say, accept yourself as you are. I disagree. You should never accept being weak. You should never accept being average. You must change yourself. Not for society, not for your friends, not for your family. Change yourself for you. Because let me tell you something. Nobody is coming to save you. Not your parents, not your teachers, not your boyfriend or girlfriend. Only you can change your life. When I was struggling, I could have made excuses. English is too hard. I don't have enough money. I'm not smart enough. But I didn't. I looked in the mirror and said, "Sophia, stop making excuses. It's time to work." And that's exactly what I did. The truth about success and what you need to do. If you're still reading this, it means you want more from life. So let me give you the real truth. Learn English like your life depends on it, because it does. If you want a great career, you need English. If you want to travel the world, you need English. If you want to change your life, you need English. Stop being lazy. Get up. Open a book. Watch English videos. Do the work. Put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Talk to strangers. Make mistakes. Embarrass yourself. That's how you grow. The life I built and the life you can build. Today I live in a beautiful apartment in downtown Toronto. Every morning I wake up feeling proud of myself. I drive my dream car. I travel to different countries. I help my parents financially. And most importantly, I love my life, but remember, I wasn't born lucky. I created this life. I worked for it. And you can too. Your choice. Stay the same or change your life. Right now you have two choices. Close this page and do nothing. Stay the same. Keep making excuses. Keep dreaming, but never acting. Or start working on yourself right now. Learn English every day. Improve yourself. Change your life. The choice is yours. If you choose the second option, then start right now. Because trust me, when you become the best version of yourself, it feels like the world is in your hands. Now go.